Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy little human being you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's Hallowstein video, the final Hallowstein video in my Hallowstein series. I'm so happy we could meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this craziness, today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or BRATTERSTEIN, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the Slenderman stabbing survivor, Payton Leutner. Are you familiar? But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically, you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us. One of us. One of us. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you want. They're both BRATTERSTEIN, but no pressure. And now that I'm done essentially begging you to join my cult, we can get into this story. Now, the Slenderman stabbing. Have you heard of this one? Maybe you have. I know that I've been planning on doing this particular case for a while. This is one that I actually got recommended a bunch of times around the same time that I covered the Skylar Niece case because of the parallels and the similarities between the two cases. But at the time that I uploaded my Skylar Niece video, I already knew I wanted to do this story for Hallowstein because Slenderman, Hallowstein, Halloween, creepy, Slenderman, you know what I'm saying. And on top of that, we've discussed like a lot of death recently, which I mean is what we do here, but it's been a while since we covered just a straight survivor story, which I love to do and I know you guys love to do, and this is a survivor story. So essentially what happened in this case is in a suburb of Milwaukee, which is called Waukesha, Wisconsin, on May 30th, 2014, two 12-year-old girls attempted to stab to death their other 12-year-old friend, that was Payton, the girl we're going to be discussing today, in a ritual sacrifice simply to win the favor of the fabled Slenderman because they truly believed that he was real. Sounds crazy, but it's true. This really happened. So with all that said, I'm going to tell you the whole story today. And while I do, I'm going to be putting on a face of makeup. Now, if that's not your thing, thanks for hanging out this long. It's been great meeting you. I hope you found a channel that you enjoy more. But if you're kind of on the fence, like that sounds weird, I don't know how I feel, maybe stick around. I think you could be surprised by how much you like me. Not in a cocky way, it just seems like we'd get along. You seem cool, I think I'm okay. Maybe we can hang out, I don't know. Now with all of that said, come, gather around and let me tell you the story of the Slenderman stabbing survivor, Payton Leutner. Okay, so I guess the first thing we should do here is kind of talk about who Slenderman was in case you don't know, or give you just a recap in case you have heard of him. Find out who he was, what was his deal, what was up with that vanilla face. So Slenderman was born in June of 2009 when a man, a boy, a male, maybe, presumably, named Eric Knudsen, like the sour cream, who went by the internet handle of Surge, posted on a thread called Something Awful. Something Awful? I'm pretty sure it was Something Awful. And this was on the Creepypasta website. Now, if you're not familiar with the Creepypasta website, the Creepypasta website is essentially a collection of user-generated horror fan sites in which written, photoshopped, and videotaped accounts of encounters with monsters and supernatural evil are presented as real in the form of encyclopedia entries, testimonials, and other documentary evidence. So this is where Victor Surge, Eric Sour Cream Knudsen, posted the first ever photos of Slenderman, and these photos were said to have been recovered from the Sterling City fire, the Sterling City blaze. I don't think it was a real thing. And the lore was that on the day of this fire, when these photos were taken, 14 children also went missing. If you look at these photos, they show a group of children who were just hanging out, chilling, not killing. And in the background is a elongated, creepy dude with a white face. Well, not a face, a white shape where a face would be, just lurking in the background, being creepy. Being creepypasta. If I get what a creepypasta is wrong or seem like I don't know what I'm talking about, that's because I am a 1,000-year-old grandmother who does not use creepypastas. Creepypasta. I don't use that site. It's not for me. So people on the Something Awful thread really liked Slenderman. They like fucked with him heavy. And though there have been many different creepy things that were posted on there, because that was kind of the point, something about this one really tickled their fancy. And Slenderman ended up taking on a life of his own with different drawings, videos made of him, different adaptations, different lore around who the Slenderman was. Started to come out. People started posting their own photos of Slenderman in different places and during different decades, and they even started posting their own stories of different close encounters and brushes with death that they had at the hands of Slenderman, even though this wasn't real, but they were presented as real because that was the point of the site. Slenderman was sometimes said to kill people himself, particularly children, and sometimes said to convince people to do his bidding. He was said to be able to connect to you telepathically. Once you knew about him, who you better believe he knew about you, and would just end up in your mind, speaking in your head, and that he could also give you a thing called the slender sickness that just totally messed you up. You would get nosebleeds, you would like cough up blood, it was all bad. You get real bad paranoia, and it just was straight up not a good time. The slender sickness, that is. Slenderman was drawn as a tall man with an all-white face with tentacles that would shoot out of his back to capture children with, of course, and that these tentacles were sharp and could skewer you. He was also said to wear a black suit because he was fancy, okay? And he was said to be anywhere from 6 to 14 feet tall. He's a big boy. See, I personally like to picture Slenderman in like a tuxedo t-shirt because it says that I want to be formal, but I'm here to party. And I like to party, so I like my Slenderman to party. I also like to think of Slenderman as like with giant eagle's wings, and he's singing lead vocals for Lynyrd Skynyrd with like an angel band. And I'm in the front row, and I'm hammer drunk. Anyways, Slenderman was born on that day in 2009 and has since never really died. And his actual origin story and why he came to be is far less creepy than it has been made into now. Slenderman was actually the product of a creative mind who responded to a Photoshop contest. And I couldn't find online if this guy actually won the Photoshop contest, Mr. Eric Sour Cream Knudsen, Victor Surge. I couldn't find if he won this Photoshop contest, but he definitely should have, considering what Slenderman has become since being born. In addition to all of the photos that have been created of Slenderman, there have also been lots of videos uploaded on YouTube, like found footage films of people running into Slenderman. There have been like actual movies. I didn't see them because they didn't look like they were going to be good in my opinion, but there are actual like feature-length films. There are video games. Slenderman even makes this weird appearance in Minecraft as the Enderman. I don't know if you're familiar, and I don't know if it's ever been confirmed that this was actually connected or if this is just a theory, but the Endermen are drawn as like these tall, long, dark, black figures, and Enderman, Slenderman, it's kind of little right on the note, right on the nose there. Minecraft people. And I have a question for all of you people out there. Do any of you have a child in your life that is obsessed with Minecraft? Because good God, my nephew, bless his heart, drives me ass bananas with wanting to talk about Minecraft every second of every time and every day that we are together. That's all he wants to discuss. So that's why I even know of this, because like I would not normally know that Slenderman/Enderman was in Minecraft, but I have a picture of an Enderman drawn on my fridge right now because my nephew is obsessed. And now it makes me really wonder if Eric Knudsen is getting some sort of royalties, because he should be making money on this. He should. Okay, so now that we've gotten the backstory, we're going to move on to Waukesha, Wisconsin, where our story begins, where two 12-year-olds tried to murder their friend so that they could chill with this guy Slenderman that we have been talking about. Alright, so Morgan Geyser and Payton Leutner had been friends for years, since the day they met in the school lunchroom in the 4th grade. So they were like 9 or 10 when they became friends. Payton entered the lunchroom and saw a young Morgan sitting by herself and decided to take it upon herself to walk over and make a new friend. And from that point on, the duo was best friends. Both girls loved cats and roller skating, and they'd have little slumber parties like adorable 12-year-old girls do. They also love playing imagination and playing dress up. And Morgan even started calling Payton by her family nickname Bella. It was a nickname that was reserved for those who loved her since she was in the 1st grade, but Morgan and Payton were so close that she did call her by that, her nickname Bella. Morgan even said that for a long time, Payton was her only friend. That was until the 6th grade. It was in the 6th grade when things started to change a little bit, and that's because Morgan met a new friend, a girl named Anastasia Weir. Aina was new to the area and had just moved into an apartment that was super close to Morgan's. They were actually in the same apartment complex, so the two eventually developed a friendship because they would ride the bus together each morning to school, there and back. To school, from school. They were both on the same bus, lived in the same apartment complex. And this was good. It should have been good. It seemed like a good thing because, you know, Payton was Morgan's only friend, and now she had another person that she could relate to. And Aina and Morgan were both a bit like, they were kind of loners and didn't have a lot of other people they could turn to. So this seemed like it would be a good friendship, and they really clung to each other. They seemed to get along well, have a lot in common, and were both very adaptable to one another, I think is a good way to put it. Morgan was a bit of an odd child. She would get in trouble at school for things that were maybe harmless acts, like throwing bugs on people, other kids, being like, hey, here's a bug, look at it, throwing it at them, and bringing rubber hammers into school, which I guess is a little bit weird. She also reportedly weirded out other kids, seemingly on purpose, by running around in circles and pretending to be a dog, barking like a dog, just like Brenda from 6 Feet Under. I'm gonna reference 6 Feet Under in every video from here on out. Anyway, when her room was checked after the crime, they found tons and tons of pictures of Slenderman all over her room that she had drawn herself and mutilated dolls, which is a bit weird. And in her computer at home, they found some searches for things like how to get away with murder, and showed that she had watched a lot of videos sort of giving her quizzes on what type of crazy she was. She also Googled, what kind of insane am I? They also searched her locker after the fact and found a lot of incriminating things in there as well, like a murder list, which was basically a list of things that she may need to take on an expedition if she was to kill somebody and then try to go on the run. But it's weird because prior to this, there really wasn't a lot of red flags for people. She did well in school, she kept her grades up, she was social, she wasn't like pulling away or being super weird, so there wasn't a lot to go on prior to the crime to make people worry that this crime could even be a possibility. She was just like a creepy, odd artist, which normally you'd want to nurture, but maybe not here. Aina was different than Morgan in that she was a seemingly normal kid, maybe a bit meek, a little nerdy, but fiercely defensive and protective of her friend Morgan. It was her only friend, so she'd go in hard for her a lot, since a lot of kids thought she was weird. She had gone to a different elementary school than the other girls and had recently moved to the area and transferred to their school after her parents had gotten a divorce. When she came to the school, however, she wasn't immediately comfortable and didn't immediately make friends. She wasn't that kid that people were going to go up to and try to make friends with, and she didn't go out of her way to make friends either. She sort of kept to herself and even spent the first several months mostly by herself. No one to hang out with in between periods or to eat lunch with. That was until the day, of course, when Morgan came up to her on the school bus, sat down next to her, and developed a friendship. It's very similar to how her and Payton became friends, only it was Payton who was the initiator. And from that point on, the two were very, very close. As Morgan and Aina became closer friends, due to necessity, Aina and Payton became friends as well, though Payton would say that she wasn't like super crazy about Aina. And here's the problem. We're going to talk about the problem. I've said the problem. I've said it once. I've said it twice. I'll say it 1,000 times. Groups of 3 girls never end up going well. From my own personal experience, I've been here and I've done that. It's never gotten to the point that our stories have gotten to, thank the Lord. But, you know, it just always ends up being not a great situation. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, I'm sure you can deduce based on what I have been saying, as the 3 started to hang out, Morgan and Aina got closer and closer. They even ended up giving each other little nicknames. Aina was Scorpion and Morgan was Kitty, and the two just bonded over and over, continuously on their shared interests, like Slenderman and Creepypasta, the site in general, and as a result, Payton, who had been Morgan's best friend forever, started to feel pushed aside and left out. And the other two girls didn't exactly go out of their way to make sure that Payton felt good about it. And I don't know if these kids, these two girls, were trying to be dicks specifically, or if they were just like 12 and 12-year-olds are just naturally dicks, but like, okay, I said that they were really into Slenderman. They found Slenderman online, they found the Creepypasta site, and they were all about it. They were like, oh my god, Slenderman, that's my boy, that's my homie, pour out one for Slenderman, whatever. Well, Payton wasn't into it. Payton was like, nah dog, that's really weird. I don't really want to like look into this. I don't want to be part of this. And she let them know that like it wasn't really her thing. It freaked her out. She didn't like it. And these girls, because they were dicks or because they were 12, they didn't like respect Payton's boundaries about not wanting to see or fugs with Slenderman at all. And they would send her photos of Slenderman. They would send her links of Slenderman. They'd be like, yo, he's outside your window, he's watching you. They were just fucking with her, right? And it scared her because this stuff is scary. And she even went to her mom and was like, Mom, this stuff is freaking me out. And her mom was like, don't you worry. There's nothing. I've looked online. This guy isn't real, but it didn't stop her from being scared and it didn't stop them from screwing with her. Payton later said of her friend's obsession with Slenderman, and I quote, Morgan liked it and thought it was real, but I went along with it. I was supportive because I thought that's what she liked. So as the school year progressed, Morgan and Anissa kind of stayed in their own little Slenderman bubble. And though Payton was still their friend technically, like they were still like best friends, she was branching out and making new friends, different friends, friends who shared her interests, mutual interests, friends who weren't obsessed with Slenderman and weren't constantly being a dick to her and weren't constantly talking shit behind her back like her best friends were. And I'm sure part of the reason this happened is because Payton later said that like the girls weren't very nice to her. Like sometimes if they hung out individually they would be, but when they were all together as a group, the two girls were mean to her. And I'm sure that just became very tiresome. And I'd want to branch out and find new friends too. No one wants to hang out with mean people. Mean people are nerds. We don't like nerds. We don't like mean nerds. Right? Okay. But the three were still friends. Even though she had been branching out, they were still friends. And come the end of May of 2014, I believe is the year we're discussing here, the three were planning to get together and celebrate Morgan's 12th birthday. They were going to hang out, they were going to go skating, they were going to eat pizza, they were going to stay up all night watching movies and just being 12-year-old girls. And they were all really excited about it. Payton was also really excited about this and had been looking forward to it for weeks. So the girls all got together on Friday to celebrate after they got out of school. But before they all got together, Morgan and Anissa made the trip over to Anissa's house, because remember, they live in the same apartment complex. And they just like packed a bag together of totally normal things that you may need if you were gonna go on a trip. Okay? After that, the three got together and they had like a good night. They went to the skating rink, they went to Skateland to do, you know, their roller skating, and they roller skated for hours that night. They had pizza, they went back to Morgan's house and they had their slumber party. But what was weird in hindsight is that initially, you know, they had planned to stay up all night. You know, it's her birthday. This is what you do when you have childlike energy. But for whatever reason, Morgan didn't want to stay up all night. She was actually kind of quick to rush everybody to bed. And at the time, you know, Payton thought it was a little weird, but she was like, okay, like, sure, whatever, we'll go to bed. And they just went to sleep. And Anissa admitted that night, because apparently, the way I understand it from what I read, is that Morgan and Anissa slept on the bed normal, like pillows at the top and them laying there. And that Payton laid across the foot of the bed. And I guess Payton had accidentally kicked Anissa while she was sleeping. So in response, she purposely kicked Payton in the face, which is very rude. But I mean, the least of the bad things that are going to happen here, so. Payton herself later said of that night, and I quote, "Something was strange, because at all of our past sleepovers, Morgan always wanted to stay up all night because she could never do that at home. But on the night of the birthday party, she wanted to go to bed. Once I look back on it, I was like, that's really weird. Why didn't I see something? Why didn't I notice that something was weird? But I'm not blaming myself at all, because who could ever see something like this coming? Nobody could ever see something like this coming." The next morning, Payton woke up to being in the room by herself. Her friends had already woken up before her, and she walked downstairs to meet them, and she found them on the computer playing, so they all hung out. They had breakfast together, which was donuts and strawberries, which, one, to have a child's metabolism again. Can you even imagine? And two, that sounds absolutely horrible to me. I don't know what it is, but like, strawberries are already so tart. Like, how often do you have a good strawberry? People who try to convince me that strawberries are good, I will not understand, because I have never in my life had a good strawberry. But anyway, strawberries and donuts. And then they just hung out together, had fun together, had a totally normal morning, played dress up, as kids do. They crushed up granola bars and then put them in silly putty and then threw them at their ceiling. Total kid stuff. They just had like a totally normal time. There was nothing going on that would make anyone think that anything bad was going to happen that day, is the point. Later that day, the girls were bored, so they decided to ask Morgan's mom if they could like go to the park together. Fully expecting, I imagine, for her to say no, because she never let them go out to the park by themselves because they were actual children. But on this day, Morgan's mom surprised them. It was her birthday. She's like, you know what? Go for it. Have fun. Stay safe. Come back before the street lights turn on. Whatever mom say. And the girls headed out, walking into the park. While they were walking, Payton was a couple of, steps ahead of them. She was like walking a bit faster, and Morgan and Anissa kind of fell behind. And this is when Morgan took that opportunity to show Anissa something sinister that was hidden in her jacket. She pulled her jacket aside to show Anissa a knife, a big old knife that she had with her, letting Anissa know that it was on. And when Anissa saw it, she was like, oh shit, we're really doing this. Once the three got to David's park, almost immediately they headed to the bathroom. And it was in the bathroom that the three girls got into a sort of fight. How it started exactly, like what really initiated it, is unclear. I've read a bunch of conflicting articles on what actually happened in there, but essentially the girls were trying to first kill Payton in that bathroom, but it didn't go according to plan. So they get in a fight. Anissa even like slams Payton's head back into the wall to try to knock her unconscious, but it doesn't work. And it's at that point that Morgan starts to like freak out and gets so bad that Anissa has to console her. And to console her, it's said that she pet her and cooted her like she was a cat. Now, after this fight, failed attack on Payton, why the group didn't just like separate at that point, I don't know. I don't understand why Payton didn't just straight up dip after her friends tried to like jump her in a bathroom. I don't understand. But neither of those things happened, and the three stayed hanging out like nothing had happened. Like nothing weird had just happened, which is sad. After that, the group decides that they should like cool off and have some fun. So why not play hide and seek about it? Play hide and seek, they say. It'll be fun, they say. It wasn't a good time. So the group goes deeper into the woods, and this is when Morgan decides that she's going to be the first seeker. So Anissa and Payton run further into the woods. And by woods, there weren't woods in like the sense that you and I might be thinking of them, like deep, thick, dense woods. It was more like sparse trees. Like less than a mile away, there was a Walmart on the other side. It wasn't like a national forest or anything like that. Anyways, Payton and Anissa run into these woods, and Payton lays on the ground, covers herself with licks with sticks and leaves to hide herself. She's trying to camouflage, and she laid on the ground and listened to Morgan counting out loud. Anissa said of this moment after the fact, and I quote, "She was going to hide in one place, and I was going to hide in another. And then Morgan and I were going to be lionesses chasing down a zebra." Morgan handed me the knife and said, "I can't do it. You know where all the soft spots are." And then I gave it back to her and said, "You do it. Go ballistic. Go crazy. Make sure she's down." The counting stopped, and within moments, Payton looked up to find her best friend Morgan standing above her, holding a knife. And in the background, she heard Anissa egging Morgan on. Morgan then said to Payton, and I quote, "Don't be afraid. I'm only a little kitty cat." She then straddled Payton, said, "I'm so sorry," and went off, stabbing her over and over and over, while Anissa stood right next to her. Morgan stabbed Payton 19 times. Morgan stabbed her in her chest, her abdomen, her arm, her leg, and then just stopped and stood there and stared at her on the ground. Payton at one point tried to get up, even though she couldn't see, and tried to like head towards the road, and Anissa stopped her, turned her back away from the road and told her to just lay down, that she would bleed out slower if she just laid down, and told her not to worry, that they were going to go and get some help. The last thing Payton said to these girls was, "I trusted you. I hate you. I can't see," before they left her there to bleed out and die alone. Fortunately for Payton and for, you know, this whole situation in general, Payton was a smart girl, and she had the presence of mind to know that these girls were not going to get her help. They weren't coming back. They were leaving her there to die by herself. So she used all the strength she had. How she had any, I will not understand. And even though she had been stabbed everywhere and couldn't see, she somehow motivated herself to get up, hold on to some trees to find her way, and make her way to the road. And man, she'd happened to make it to the road at the most absolute perfect time, because shortly after she made it there, a man named Greg rode by on his bicycle and was able to find her and help her. And what's really crazy is I read in a report that this guy Greg wasn't even supposed to be there, because when he was going on his ride, the road that he ended up going on was like chained off, so you couldn't go down it at that time, and he kind of looked at it and was like, well, fuck that, I'm going anyway. And if he hadn't, can you even imagine? We'd be telling a different story today, which would be really, really sad. So he called police and he reported what he found. He told police that he had found a 12-year-old female that appeared to have been stabbed, that she was taking shallow breaths and couldn't see. He said that she was just laying there on the grass, but remaining conscious. It's just upsetting because she was such a little kid, dude. 12 is so young. She was literally wearing like little yellow pants and this white shirt with a heart on it that said like love and hope and dream. And those tiny little kid clothes were covered in blood. So when police arrived, they found Payton laying on the ground, and one of the officers said of this moment of finding Payton, and I quote, "As I got closer, I started to see a little bit more blood. And the closer I got, the more blood I saw." Payton, as I'm sure you can imagine, was taken in for emergency surgery, but before she went under, she was able to tell police exactly who had attacked her, exactly who had tried to murder her, and that was her two 12-year-old friends, Morgan and Anissa. So Payton was in surgery, and the police were out looking for these two tiny little attempted murderers. Well, at the time, they could have ended up murderers. They didn't know if Payton was going to make it. They were like, I don't know, doesn't look good, check back later. But so they were out looking for these girls. That day, police arrived at Payton's mother and father's home to inform them that their daughter had been attacked, had been stabbed, was in the hospital, and the two other girls were missing. That was when they learned that Payton had been stabbed in several of her organs, including her heart, and that the stab to her heart was only a millimeter away from being fatal. It did not take police long, however, to find these girls. They had tried to make it to Slenderman's castle, because apparently he has one of those, and they had packed a bag, remember, at Anissa's for this trip that they were going to take, because they anticipated it being a real trek, because they were children, and they thought that they could make it to this place on foot. What they actually ended up doing is walking to that Walmart, the one that was on the other side of the forest, and cleaning themselves up a bit before just walking around for hours before being picked up by police on the side of a freeway. When they were picked up, they both had blood all over their clothes, and inside their bag was the knife used to stab Payton, along with other various items they would need for their hike to Slenderman's castle. Anissa said of the time after the attempted murder and the trek to Slenderman's castle, and I quote, "I had a total nervous breakdown and blamed Morgan for everything. I said, you stabbed her. You wanted to do this." Morgan is not one to cry very often, but finally, she just let go and just started crying. So police bring them in and talk to them, and this is when they first learn just all the crazy details of this case, like the fact that these two 12-year-old girls had been planning to kill Payton for months prior to the attack. 6 months prior to the attack, they had been planning it all that time, and they had been talking about it constantly. They found that the girls had been emailing each other back and forth for months, talking about all their plans, all their details, everything they were going to do, and they even found that the girls had used code words in the emails so that if they were ever to be found, people wouldn't know what they were talking about. They used the word cracker for knife, I believe, and itch for killing. The girls' initial plan was actually to kill Payton at the slumber party. They were going to kill her while she slept, so it would be easy and it would be quick and there wouldn't be much of a fight. Which is why Morgan was so quick for them to all go to bed that night, remember? Payton thought it was weird that she just wanted to go to bed so quickly. Well, this is why, because they were going to kill her when she fell asleep. Anissa said of this, and I quote, "From what I've read, it's easier to kill people if they're either asleep or unconscious, because if you look in their eyes, you can see yourself, and you don't want to be killing yourself." She's 12. So yeah, they plan to kill her in Morgan's house, to leave her there after trying to hide her a little bit, and then heading off into the night towards Slenderman's castle, knowing that they'd have several hours of a head start before anyone even knew that Payton was dead. The second attempt, as I said, was in that bathroom at the park. They thought that this would be the perfect place to kill Payton because there was a drain in the bathroom floor that could catch all the blood. That's why when they were in there, they slammed her head into the wall because they wanted to try to knock her unconscious because it's easier to kill people that way. But again, that plan failed as well. Then the two went on to plan number 3, which is the one we discussed today, which is killing her or trying to kill her in the park. And Morgan thought that this went great. She said of trying to kill her best friend, and I quote, "People who trust you become very gullible. It's sort of sad." When asked how it felt for her to stab her friend, she said of this, and I quote, "I didn't feel anything. It just felt like air. It was just like stabby, stab, stab, stab." She was doing this shit in the air. She also said after the fact, "I'm in here because we were careless. I knew this would happen. I knew we'd get in trouble." When asked why they did what they did, Anissa said it was to impress Slenderman, to be in his good favor or his good graces or whatever, and they thought in order to do that you had to kill someone who was very important to you, like your best friend, and then he would just accept you with open arms, and once they were going to arrive at his castle, he was going to let them live there and make them into mini monsters just like he was. The mansion that they were headed to was situated in a place called Nicollet State Park that was about an hour from their home. And they were just gonna like show up at his doorstep, knock, and be like, "What's up? This is what we did." And then he could like look into their minds telepathically and see that it was true, and then accept them in and never hurt them or their family, and everything was gonna be just A+. Everything was gonna be coming up Millhouse. Anissa told police that it was Morgan who did all the stabbing, which turned out to be true because Payton lived to tell the tale and could corroborate this, but Morgan actually tried to throw her friend Anissa under the bus right away, saying that Anissa had also taken part in the stabbing, that she had actually started the stabbing, and that she had forced Morgan to do so as well. When the detective asked Morgan why they took Payton to the woods that day, she said, and I quote, "Because we knew what we had to do. We led her there and tricked her. The last thing she said to me was, 'I trusted you.' Then she said, 'I hate you.'" Morgan said also of the stabbing, and I quote, "I didn't want to make Anissa mad. It's hard enough to make friends. I don't want to lose someone over something like this." Well, you've just lost Payton over, you lost your whole life over something like this, but okay. But Morgan kind of went back and forth on this, and she often seemed stern and cold, but then she would say that she didn't do it, that Anissa only did it, but the detectives who were questioning her noticed clear signs of deception. They knew she was lying. The interrogator would like ask her, you know how when you're being questioned, you may not know this, when you're being questioned or somebody's being questioned, they'll ask you the same question over and over, but in different ways, and have you tell your story over and over so that they can get any inconsistencies, things like this. Well, they were doing that with Morgan, and it's like she caught on, and she said to them, and I quote, "Are you trying to do this over and over again to see if I tell the story differently?" And she followed this up with, "I have the right to not go into detail if I don't want to." Anissa also told police that though she didn't stab Payton, she didn't actually think Morgan was totally to blame, because she said that she believed that if she had not shown Morgan Slenderman and the Creepypasta website, that Morgan would have never done this to Payton. Which is big of her for 12, actually. So at one point during her interview, Anissa actually asked police, "So where's Bella's body now?" And they called her Bella because they were friends. And that's when police informed her that Payton had actually lived. These girls thought that they were successful and that the whole time that she had died. And as soon as Anissa learned that Payton had lived, her tone changed, and she thought that like things weren't that serious anymore, that she wasn't in that much trouble. Like she was like, oh, can I go home? Can I go back to school? Because I haven't missed any school since the 3rd grade. And they were like, nah, dog. No. But yeah, dude, Payton somehow freaking lived. I don't understand science behind that, but she was fine. She lived. She had to stay in the hospital for a while and she had surgeries. But she was able to walk out, but she left with a lot of scars, mentally, emotionally, and physically. She was stabbed 19 times. After word got out of what had happened to Payton, some of the 6th graders in her school, like the ones who were in the same grade as her, had come up with this idea. They wanted to like draw little cat faces on their faces, little noses and little whiskers, because Payton loved cats and would often, you know, act like a cat and draw little whiskers on the back of her hand because that was like her thing, because she was an actual little baby girl who loved cats, and they thought if they did this that she'd hear about it or see photos and it would make her happy. But the teachers, knowing more details about what had happened, like shut that down quickly because of the fact that Morgan had said that she was a cat before attacking her and trying to murder her. So the 2 girls were arrested, obviously, and it was up in the air at first as to whether or not these girls would be tried as adults, because they were only 12, but because of the magnitude of the crime, it was 1st-degree intentional and premeditated homicide, or at least attempted homicide, and that could easily get them tried as adults, because I believe in the state that they were in, you could be tried as an adult for that crime when you were as young as 10 years old. And that's exactly what happened. They were considered to be a danger to society, and they were subsequently tried as adults for this crime. And I know some of you feel very weird about minors being tried as adults, and I can understand that. I feel like what needs to happen is just like a bit of a reform in the justice system when it comes to minors. Maybe still try them as minors, but make the punishments harsher for specific crimes, since technically they are minors, you know what I mean? Because obviously it doesn't make sense to try a minor as an adult, but the punishments for minors who do things this horrible should probably be worse than they are if they are tried as minors, if that makes sense. So I understand that some people are going to be like, why would they be tried as adults when they are clearly kids? And it's because with the system currently, if they were tried as minors, the punishment would not even come close to fitting the crime. So that needs to probably be addressed, but who knows if it ever will, you know? Trying to get things to change is a struggle. During Morgan's trial, it was determined that she had early onset schizophrenia, which is super rare for someone her age. I think in general, it comes when you're in your late teens, like 20s, 30s, something a little bit later. But it was different for Morgan because her father had actually been diagnosed with a similar disorder and was hospitalized as a teenager, so it was in her genetics. She was also diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder alongside her schizophrenia, and her doctor actually said that she started having hallucinations as young as 3 years old. She'd see bright images pop up on the wall and would feel ghosts hugging her. To which I say, absolutely fucking not. The doctor also said that once she was old enough to realize that the things she was seeing other people were not seeing, she started to hide them so people wouldn't think she was crazy. She also told the doctor that, and I quote, "If Slenderman had told me to break into someone's house and stab them, I would have done it." Morgan ended up taking a plea deal where she pled guilty to 1st-degree intentional homicide, and she was given 40 years in a mental health facility as opposed to a prison. The judge said of Morgan's sentencing, and I quote, "It's a long time, but this is an issue of community protection. This is an issue to ensure there is no recidivism. This is an issue to ensure that Miss Geyser doesn't have a revolving door situation, where she ends up being in the community, things fall apart, and she comes back." Anissa took a plea deal as well, where she pled guilty to 2nd-degree intentional homicide, and she was actually found not guilty due to mental disease and or defect, and was subsequently sentenced to 25 years in a mental health facility. But she would be up for getting out sooner, I believe, if she was better sooner. Both girls tried to appeal. Morgan's appeal even ended up going to the Supreme Court in 2020. Like, they were trying to appeal to the Supreme Court, which I think is like the last ditch effort you can do. And they were doing it on the grounds that because of Morgan's age, her sentencing was unfair, but the Supreme Court decided to not even hear the appeal. So that was unsuccessful. And as for Anissa, she was actually released this year, dude. She was released this year. She was 19 years old, and she was set to be released on September 13th, 2021. Because it was said that there was clear and convincing evidence that the defendant does not pose a substantial risk of harm to herself, to others, or serious property damage. The property damage thing I think is weird, but okay. So she is presumably released by now. I mean, it's been a month since her release date has come and gone, so she's presumably out. Of course, Payton's family wasn't happy to hear that she was being released. They felt like she should have served more of her time before being released, because that was only a couple of years. But they are reasonably comfortable with the rules that Anissa must follow upon her release, whatever those rules are. Anissa said of her release, and I quote, "I have exhausted all the resources available to me at the Winnebago Mental Health Institute. If I am to become a productive member of society, I need to be part of society." So, yeah. Payton is doing well. The last interview she did was, I believe, in 2020, and she was a senior in high school at that point, and she was planning to go to college in the fall of 2020, so presumably that's what she's done. She said that she doesn't talk to those girls, obviously, but she said that if she was to, she would actually thank Morgan. She said of this, and I quote, "I would probably initially thank her. I would say, just because of what you did, I have the life that I have now. I really like it, and I have a plan. I didn't have a plan when I was 12. And I do now because of everything I went through." That is so big of her. I don't know if I'd be so big. I don't know if I'd be so big and strong and bold. That's wild to me. Payton's family is super proud of her, as I'm sure you can imagine, because she's doing so well now, and she had such a hard time when it first happened. She had a hard time being around people, trusting people, being with friends, sleeping at night. She even slept with a pair of scissors under her pillow for the longest time for protection because she didn't feel safe. Payton said of her scars, and we're talking physical this time, and I quote, "I've come to accept all the scars that I have. It's just a part of me. I don't think much of them. They'll probably go away and fade eventually." And that, my friends, is the story of the Slenderman stabbing survivor, Payton Leutner. What do you think? Isn't it wild? I can only imagine that if you had never heard this story before, you would be like, I'm sorry, what? But yeah, these kids literally tried to murder their best friend in a ritual sacrifice so that they could be friends with Slenderman, who was a literal fake internet monster. It's absolutely insane. And as I'm sure you can imagine, this case opened up the endless conversation about the internet and how dangerous it is for kids to use unsupervised, because it's literally just an endless black hole of any information that you want to find or can find, and kids are so gullible. But really, the million-dollar question is, what is the solution? What is the answer to the question of how to keep these kids safe? And I just truly have no fucking idea. All I know is that this shit is terrifying. This whole story to me is so terrifying. The fact that these little kids were able to hold this sort of darkness and this sort of plan inside them for months and no one had any idea is horrifying, because you don't expect something like this to happen ever. Never, ever, ever. But when they're 12, when they're actual little babies, they were little murderous babies. And that's crazy. I guess for what it's worth, it does actually seem like Morgan was mentally ill. I mean, just the fact that she Googled what type of insane I am. What type of insane am I? What type of insane am I? I believe is pretty telling of what she was going through. Not that it excuses anything. I mean, technically they both were found to be mentally inept, to be held guilty of their crimes, to go to jail, which actually, I think personally being sent to the hospital was probably the right choice here. Just simply because if these kids who are this young do something like this because they are mentally ill, they need to go to a hospital as opposed to a jail, because they're not going to get the help they need in jail. You know what I mean? Mentally ill people do not get the help they need in jail. And obviously this would need to be a case-by-case basis, because every case is unique and not every child killer is mentally ill. But maybe this should be what happens more often. I don't know. It's a complex issue, and that's why we don't have a real solution. So. But anyways, guys, that completes this video. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and it gave you all the information you would want when looking into this case. And of course, thank you for hanging out and remembering Payton with me today. What she went through is so absolutely horrible and trauma. Can you imagine the trauma of going through something like that? And then to think about, what if that man hadn't been there? He wasn't supposed to be there. That must be such a scary thought for her and her family. I cannot even imagine. Please let me know of what cases you would like to see me cover next. As you know, I have a very long list of cases I would like to cover. I was going to say both Hallowstein and morbid makeup, but sadly Hallowstein is over. So just send me your requests for morbid makeup videos or for Hallowstein videos for next year, because I love hearing your suggestions for cases, because I know you're filled with good taste and good ideas. Otherwise you would not be here. Of course, if you have not already, don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell, because I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically, you. And if you want to hang out more consistently, you can follow me on all my other social media if you want. Everything's linked down below for you to hang out with me, along with my makeup, earrings, nail polish. Everything's down there for your convenience, along with the link to my merch. If you haven't gotten it yet, Chillin' Not Killin' merch. You guys seem to really like this, which I love, and I do plan to release another one. I think it's next week at the time that I'm uploading this for my birthday. I'm going to release another one for you guys that my husband designed, and I think you will love it. Also down below, I'm going to try to remember to list a couple of other videos of people who have covered this case. Both Stephanie Harlow and Bailey Sarian, I know, have covered this case. I think that's it. So I'm going to link them both down below so you can see other creators cover the story as well, because you may get more information or different information, or you might just want to watch it again, because I know that when I find a case that's interesting to me, I like to watch a lot of different people's perspectives. So I will link them down below if I remember. I think that's it. Is that it? Is that it? Anyways, guys, with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe. Have a happy Halloween, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.